Hi there. Welcome to the Serial Cynic channel. And it occurred to me I have not done a video in quite some time. And I guess this might be a good time to do one because a topic came to mind that I would like to talk about. Now, over the past few weeks, maybe months, I have been going back to history class, basically. I've always been a lover of history. Really love it because I am a stickler for perspective. I just believe you can't understand anything now if you're not familiar with how we arrived at certain things, why we do certain things, why we believe certain things. And as a result, again, I've just been going back looking at history again. From since I was a little boy, used to study a lot to do with history. And one of the things that I used to study in history was American history. Now, this may seem somewhat odd, being that I was actually born, well, I was born on American soil, but I was actually born in the Caribbean, on the island of St. Thomas. But I came to the United States as a little boy, and I'm talking about way back when. I came over as a little boy, and when I moved over here, this was of course long before the internet, long before social media, long before quite a bit of things. So when I came here to this country, to the mainland United States, it was not as if I knew much about anything, about the history of the world or what's going on. So when I came here, I was just fascinated by the things I read in history class about the American Revolution. And I read about all these great American heroes. So from a very young age, I had this lofty idea of this country known as America. Of course, all these years later, that has basically changed. And when I say that I've been reading and going back over things in history, I guess I've been relearning. And what I've been trying to do this time around is to see history, if I can get the information from the other side telling the story, or basically how it may have been viewed through their eyes. Most of the things I learned about history over the years had been coming from an American perspective, filtered through their understanding of the world and understanding other people or other events in other parts of the world. Well, that has changed over the years, of course, but recently I've been really trying to do my homework and try to understand more of how the other side looked at it, or how the victims in the process on the other side of history, how they may have looked at things, or what they were trying to say, or what was actually their story. Well, one of those things happens to be, or one of those events, I should say, I shouldn't say events, but I should say how the United States handled things in certain parts of the world, such as the Caribbean, where I'm from. So what came to mind was a song I grew up listening to as a little boy. I've always loved the song, and I've always sort of had an understanding of what the artist was talking about. But I never really paid attention to it or took a deep look into it to make it relevant to what I've been looking at and paying attention to of late. The song is Ambush in the Night, and it's written by Bob Marley and sung by Bob Marley and the Wailers. I don't know if it's Bob Marley and the Wailers or just Bob Marley. But in that song, he speaks about something. And just to give a little bit of a background, the song Ambush in the Night was written because there was an attempt on Bob Marley's life, I think back in 1976, if I'm not mistaken, on the island of Jamaica where he was born. There was an attempt on his life, and he was injured, but he did not die. And so the song came about where he was basically hinting at the fact that his assassination attempt was politically motivated. And you have to understand what may have led up to it to understand why he may have been targeted. Now, I think there have been different people who've written different books on what may have led up to it. But from where I sit, I think the belief was that Marley appeared to tacitly support one side, one political party in Jamaica over the other. And I'll give a background about that in a minute. But in the song, he basically sings about certain things. And he starts off by saying this: see them fighting for power, but they know not the hour. This part is critical. So they bribing with their guns, spare parts and money, trying to belittle our integrity now. They say what we know is just what they teach us. And we're so ignorant because every time they can reach us through political strategy, they keep us hungry. And when you're going to go get some food, your brother's got to be your enemy. And he goes on talking about ambush in the night. Give you some perspective of what Marley was talking about here. In the early 1970s in Jamaica, Michael Manley became Prime Minister of Jamaica. But when he came to power, he came in as what you would call a democratic socialist today. And one of the things that he did, now remember, this was somewhat at the height of Americans being afraid of communism and communism spreading and the great fear of the Soviet Union and their influence, their sphere of influence spreading around the world. So they were competing powers. The United States wanted to spread their democracy. And of course, the Soviet Union wanted to spread their own version of governance, which is called communism. So the United States, the last thing they wanted was anyone near their borders becoming a communist state. So they had their issues with Cuba, of course, which they could not seem to get to Fidel Castro in Cuba like they wanted to remove him from power, take him down, take him out, whatever had to be done to get rid of him. Cuba, being a communist country, was a little too close for comfort for them. Now, Michael Manley, when he came to power as a democratic socialist, Jamaica being so close to Cuba, Michael Manley seemed to take on a friendship with Fidel Castro, and even went as far as acknowledging the legitimacy of the government of Fidel Castro. This bothered the United States. Not only that, Michael Manley also supported fighters in Angola who were fighting against apartheid, South African apartheid-backed and United States-backed guerrillas who were trying to take down or take control of Angola. So on one side, you had Fidel Castro, the Soviet Union, and now Michael Manley supporting those groups in Angola in Africa. Again, this concerned the United States. As a result, then President, I guess it was Nixon, then President Nixon sent his Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, down to Jamaica to go to deal with this. So Kissinger goes down, I think, in 1975, and he gets to Jamaica. And I guess he has a closed-door meeting with Michael Manley. And I'm sure the meeting went like this: hey, look, bro, we don't want you supporting this guy called Castro. Don't even think about becoming a communist nation. Don't even think about leading your island nation into communism. Now remember, Jamaica was still a fairly brand new nation, getting their independence, I guess, in the early 1960s. So Kissinger's probably in there telling Manley, Look, this whole communism thing that you're on, this communism trip, this communism love affair that you have going on, this socialism love affair that you have going on, we're not having it. Anyway, Kissinger leaves. The very next day, Michael Manley gives a speech basically saying, F you, I'm supporting those people in Angola, and I'm maintaining my friendship with Fidel Castro. In doing so, you know the United States was going to cause problems for this guy. So, if you speak to Jamaicans old enough, you will hear a lot of them telling you that around that same time, after Manley rebuffed the United States, all of a sudden there was a proliferation of guns starting to show up in what they would call the ghettos of Jamaica, the rough areas of Kingston, Jamaica. And in those areas in Kingston, Jamaica, where you had a lot of poverty at the time, you had young boys with no education, have nothing really going for them. All of a sudden you start seeing these guns showing up in those areas. And in those areas, you had strong supporters of the opposition party known as the JLP. By the way, Michael Manley was the leader of what you call the PNP, the People's National Party, whereby his opposition was an Edward Seaga for the Jamaican Labour Party. And in those areas of Kingston, those rough, tough areas of Kingston, you had people supporting both sides. Sometimes rivals or supporters were just on opposite sides of the road. And other times you had communities like Tivoli Gardens, Rima, and different rough areas there in Kingston, Jamaica, that basically supported one side over the other. Marley himself, while not born in Kingston, I guess was living in, or grew up in, or spent time living in Tivoli Gardens in Kingston. So he knew the streets basically. So all of a sudden these guns started showing up. And around the same time, elections were coming up in Jamaica, I think in 1976. And leading up to these elections, we started having some tension. Both parties started jostling for power. And their supporters now it was not just talking. Now these supporters actually had guns in hand. And if you speak to, again, Jamaicans who are old enough to remember, and those who lived in the area, the theory is, or the belief is, that these guns started showing up so that there would be infighting and a destabilization of the country with the intent of removing or getting rid of Michael Manley and his socialist ideas. The United States, through their support behind the opposition, the JLP, who they believe was going to be more friendly toward the United States, more cooperative, and were not going to go down or toward a path of socialism. So the idea was these guns were coming in and being passed out to the JLP side of things to try to intimidate the PNP side. But I guess the understanding is guns ended up on both sides, and I don't know if that was the intent, but they ended up on both sides. And then this started basically the political violence in Jamaica, and basically began or accelerated the gun culture in Jamaica, that by 1980, over 900 people were killed in political violence in Jamaica during those elections. So when Bob Marley sung the song or wrote the song, all of this happened around that same time. And I think there was a belief that some people believe that even though Bob Marley was Rastafari, and the implication was, or the impression was, they did not involve themselves in politics. It looks like, based on Marley's actions, his words, maybe some of the things he did, especially with a particular concert, it gave the impression that he was supporting Michael Manley. And Marley being a popular figure, a voice that people listen to, I guess somebody was trying to silence him. Again, we can speculate on what was going on there, but it looks like someone was trying to silence him. And I don't know if it had to do with the belief. I don't know if it had to do with his politics, whatever they may have been, or it may have been something else. I really don't know. So he wrote the song, and he basically talked about how he said, so they're bribing with their guns, spare parts, and money. And I think what Marley was talking about is that he saw, or he knew, that there were people being bribed in the community. Guns were being passed around in the communities. And they were just taking these young boys and just bribing them and using them as an ends to a means. Or as a means to an end, actually. And that was to destabilize the country, or to get rid of Michael Manley out of power, and do it from behind the scenes by using local people on the ground to do their dirty work. Marley almost got himself killed because he sort of got caught up or in the middle of all of this. But I want to also point to another country where this is probably even more evident, and we got to go back about another 10 years prior. And it's in the country that we call Guyana today. Back then, though, it was called British Guyana, when it was still a British colony, before it gained its independence. And it is documented what happened down there in just prior to their independence in 1963. A popular figure, a popular political figure in their country, his name was Chetty Jagan, and he was of East Indian descent. And all signs pointed to the fact that he was going to be the first leader of the newly independent country of Guyana. But a funny thing happened along the way before he arrived at that point. And that was, Chetty Jagan was educated in Chicago, or near Chicago, as a dentist. But it seems as though, I don't know if he had some additional education, which I think he may have. I could be wrong on this. But even if he did not, he looks like a person who was leaning toward socialism at the time. Again, because you have these two world powers that are emerging out of World War II. The United States on one hand and their democracy and capitalism. And you have the Soviet Union on the other side and their communism. And at the time, as both empires, the American Empire and the Soviet Empire, as they're spreading their sphere of influence, up and coming countries at that time, because a lot of countries were becoming independent at that time, breaking away from their colonial powers and so forth. So all these up and coming countries started to fall in positions where they need help. And you have the United States with their bags of money, and you have the Soviet Union with their power. And countries will find themselves kind of caught up with, who are we going to go with? Well, Chetty Jagan seemed like the type who was leaning towards socialism. And the rumor was he was a communist, him and his wife, who was an American-born woman, by the way. That they're communists, they're associated with communism, and we're not having any of that. Now, the British, for the most part, and the British, of course, controlled British Guyana up to this point. They didn't seem too concerned. Not saying there was not a concern there, but pressure was placed on them by the United States to do something about British Guyana, to do something about Chetty Jagan. The United States realized that this guy, Chetty Jagan, is going to come to power. And they go to England, to the British, and it was like, hey, this guy down here, hey, we don't want this communism so close to us. We think this guy is going communist. He's friends with Fidel Castro. We don't think we want him getting anywhere near power. Take care of it. The British came up with some sort of a plan and whatever they were trying to do, and I guess the plan just did not work out. Chetty Jagan was still popular, moving toward becoming leader of the new country of Guyana, as it was going to become the new country. So what the Americans did, they told England, one of the things is like, hey, look, this independence that British Guyana is looking for, stall that thing. No, 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 no. We don't want that in there. We got to take care of this guy, Chetty Jagan. We don't want it becoming independent with him at the helm. So when the British plan failed or did not materialize or they were not moving fast enough for the United States, John F. Kennedy, president at the time, decided he is going to take an active role in taking care of this matter. Chetty Jagan came over to the United States, had an audience with Kennedy, and basically said, hey, look, I'm about to embark on this new country that we're about to start here called Guyana. And I would like to know if the United States can help us out. Give us some money to get us going. Kennedy already having in his back of his mind that this guy, I don't know if I trust this guy. This guy is going to probably go communist. And I am not going to fund him, and he's going to lead his country into communism. Long story short, Chetty Jagan was sent home without any money. Chetty Jagan gets back to Guyana. And I guess he has some conversations with Fidel Castro. I guess he started leaning more towards the Soviet Union because the United States rebuffed him. And rumor has it that the United States was spying on Chetty Jagan, that there was a U.S. ship with high-tech equipment on it, spy equipment, to be able to tap into signals and so forth, that was sitting off the coast of Guyana. This is a rumor, mind you, so I can't say that's actually documented. But according to this rumor, this ship was spying in on Chetty Jagan and probably listening to his conversations that he was having with Fidel Castro. And I guess as the information was brought back to Kennedy, I guess it confirmed his fears. And I guess he was just like, you know what? Yeah, we got to get rid of this guy. And next thing you know, CIA operatives are down in Guyana. And they are presenting themselves as economic advisors, coming in to advise Chetty Jagan on how we should move forward with the economics of this new country that was expected to come to birth. In reality, these men were there to undermine Chetty Jagan. And when everything was said and done, these same CIA operatives went out there and stirred up labor unrest in the country that led to an 80-day strike, one of the longest in history, at least recorded history that we know of, or at least modern history. And because of this 80-day strike, it really, really, really undermined Chetty Jagan. And in all this mess that was going on, the British came in and basically tricked or manipulated Chetty Jagan into signing paperwork that basically gave the British the power to do whatever they wanted to do in British Guyana. Granted, it was still under British rule. And in doing so, it gave the opening for the British and the United States to go ahead and install their man, Forbes Burnham, who then eventually became the first president of the new Republic of Guyana, or the new country of Guyana. But it's during that labor unrest, there was violence. And because of the violence that was there, Guyana has always had some tension between the two major groups, Afro-Guyanese, Indo-Guyanese. And those tensions were exploited during the labor unrest that led to bloodshed, people dying, led to a lot of tension and just craziness going on during that time, leading up to the country becoming a new country, or leading up to the colony, British Guyana, becoming the new country of Guyana. And it's because of that reason I remember this song, where it says, and when you're going to go get some food, your brother's got to be your enemy. Now, notice what Bob Marley said. He said it's through political strategy they keep us hungry. And when you're going to go get some food, your brother's got to be your enemy. And when I think about that, I think about Jamaica, a country I've been to about 20 times, and Guyana, a country I've been to 7 times. And I think to myself, if you look at those 2 countries today, Jamaica is still struggling with high homicide rates, mostly due to guns. Guyana still struggles with racial politics. And these 2 things are legacies from those periods of unrest in their respective countries. In Jamaica was all these guns that came in to those rough areas of Kingston that were used to kill political opponents, that then eventually stayed in the community and gave those communities an appetite for bloodshed and violence. And in Guyana, the racial tensions were exploited. And to this very day, Guyana is still riddled with racial politics. They're still devoting down the lines of race. And in both countries, especially Guyana, which is so rich in resources, cannot move forward, cannot realize its full potential, as corruption and racial back and forth just stagnates the country. Jamaica doing a little bit better nowadays, but yet at the end of the year, you look at their homicides and you're talking about well over 1,000 in a country with only 2.5 million people. Now, I wonder if more Jamaicans and more Guyanese really understood what went on in their countries by outside forces using them to hurt themselves. If they realized this, if they taught this in school, if this was brought more out to the national consciousness, would they look around and say, you know what? Why are we fighting? Why are we at each other's throats? Do you realize that there are people that took us like puppets and played us against one another? The United States is over there, rich as ever, grinning, living large. And because of what they did to us. Now, I could talk about Haiti also. And other places in Central America and other parts of South America that the United States went down there and did their dirty deeds, manipulated the situations, caused the people to fight against one another, pull each other down, tear each other down, rip up their countries, stagnate them, halt progress because of all the infighting and the bickering, not realizing that they are one people, that they need to work together and unify to bring about a better country, a better situation. What happened if people in those respective countries came to this understanding, really understood what really went on, and came to this eureka moment like, wow, we were used. Wow, we were manipulated. And I'm here fighting against my brother, fighting against my sister, fighting against my own, because they set that in motion. And I'm just a player in this game that they had going on. And I'm not going to be played anymore. I'm going to look at my sister like she's my sister. I'm going to look at my brother like he's my brother. I'm going to look at my fellow countrymen like they are my fellow countrymen. And not somebody I need to fight with, but someone I need to help up, pull up, put my arms on their shoulder, they put theirs on mine, and we march together towards a better future. But until they realize this, even though Bob was talking about his life, but until they realize this, It would be like an ambush in the night. And we just haven't recovered from it yet. I'll leave it there. Tell me what you think. Subscribe. Talk to me in the comments. Have a good day.